amount of play. So, all right, you hear that and see that? There's some serious steering shake going on. What's going on, everybody? Super E46 here, back again for another video. And in today's video, we are going to be discussing the top 10 reasons as to why you are getting play in your steering wheel. Now, if you're watching this, obviously you're probably having some sort of issue with your steering wheel where it doesn't feel precise, or it feels like when you turn it, there's a dead spot in the middle. You turn left, you turn right, just a little bit, and the wheels don't actually turn. So I'm going to give you guys the top 10 reasons of why that could be. And make sure you stay tuned till the end, and I'm going to tell you guys what actually worked for me to get this issue solved, because this is something I've been tracking down for probably about a year now. And I've read forums, watched videos, you name it. No one was actually able to pinpoint the issue that I had. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, let's get into these top 10 reasons as to why your steering wheel has excessive play. All right, guys, so the top 10 reasons as to why you may be getting some movement in your steering, that dead spot in the middle where you turn left, you turn right, and for whatever reason, the wheels don't actually move. So there's a lot of different things that can cause that, but I just kind of broke it down to the top 10 just to give you guys just a good guide in case you're having the same issue. So number one's tires. The thing about tires is that they're very worn out. It actually can cause play in your steering wheel. Of course, they have to be excessively worn out and unevenly worn out. And if that is the case, then it could actually cause your steering wheel to have a little bit of a dead spot. Now that would bring us into number two, which would be alignment. So if your tires are that bad off and you're getting steering wheel play, chances are the bigger issue is probably that you need an alignment as well. So, and that's, something that really I would say, if we're talking about the most common reason as to why you may get this play in your steering wheel, most people, it's going to be a simple alignment. We'll be able to get the job done. So if your tires are good, you've done an alignment, and you're still having that same issue, chances are it could be this thing right here, your steering rack. This is a steering rack off a pre-facelift E46. The thing about these is there's seals on the inside. They can get worn out. You also have inner tie rods that can get worn out. We'll get to those later. But basically, there's a lot of components that make up these steering racks. And, as the E46s continue to age, most of them these days are over 20 years old. So chances are your steering rack is on its way out. So definitely something to look into there if that's the case. If you've already looked at your tires, you've done an alignment, still having the same issue, take a look at the steering rack. And when I say take a look, I mean take a look. I don't mean go ahead and replace the steering rack. I mean take a look. This next thing here is going to be something you want to be very cautious of, because I made a huge mistake on this, and now hopefully you all can learn from my mistake and not have to get yourself in the same predicament. But there's a rack adjustment as well. And this is a very interesting thing right here, because if you read forums, you're going to have people saying one thing about it, and there's really not a ton of information on this. And the interesting thing is they do not make replacement bolts. So as you can see right there, that is your rack adjustment nut, if you will. I don't really even know what you'd call it, because it's not like a typical nut. But the thing about this is they don't make replacements. So for whatever reason, you strip this out or you round off the top, which is unfortunately what happened with me, you will have to source a steering rack just to get that bolt. So, and the reason why I bring this up is because some people out there have suggested that they have play in their steering rack, and by them simply tightening this adjustment here, that it takes the play out. Now, I tried that. That is a very dangerous thing to try, and I'll tell you why. Because this adjustment is very sensitive. You have this nut right here, and then when you take that off, underneath you have a spring. Okay, now this is actually the spring that would come in a pre-facelift one. This is typically the spring you'd see in a facelift E46. Now what happens is when you start to screw this down, it compresses that spring, and it's actually gonna make your steering much, much tighter. And so I only did really a few turns on this, and it was so tight that the car was actually dangerous to drive. Steering feels like way tighter, but look, there's the exact same amount of play. So that's not the issue. Unfortunately, I might just need to completely rebuild the steering rack. You would turn right, the steering wheel would actually lock right. You would have to physically move the steering wheel back left to be able to get it straight. So in terms of this right here, I caution you, if you are going to mess with this adjustment, don't rush it and try to do a big turn and go drive the car. You need to use literally a marker, and you need to mark on the steering rack. And I'm just using a pin just for an example, but you're just going to want to mark on the steering rack, basically use a pin on that part and on that part, or a marker, you know what I mean, permanent marker. And then you're going to want to turn it the smallest bit that you can, because if you accidentally over tighten that, you're going to be in the same situation I was. And then what happened with me is I tried to loosen it and it wouldn't loosen. These things, I guess it was old, there was not rust, the threads look brand new, but for whatever reason, this is not made out of steel. This bolt is made out of aluminum, and it's a lot softer. So if you're using a steel socket on this and you start to really tighten it, you're going to round that off. So this is something that can be done, but I will tell you, if you are trying to do this method to try to get the play out of your steering wheel, be incredibly careful, because if you happen to round off this bolt, strip it, etc., you will have to source a steering rack to get this bolt, because they are not for sale on eBay. They are not for sale on FCP, Euro, ECS Tuning, Turn Motorsports. Go through the list. These are not for sale. You will not find one of these. And if you do find one of these, make sure to share a link in the comments below so that everybody else can find it. But to my knowledge, these don't exist. So, rack adjustment. We've got that covered. I briefly covered the rack spring, just kind of telling you all what it does. Now, this is super rare. I'm not saying I've ever even heard of this happening, but I would think that it could happen. These springs are not indestructible. They are strong, they're good quality, but it's always possible, because of heat, degrade, etc., that these springs could actually lose their strength. And so the issue may not even be that you need a new rack, you may just need a new spring. But the problem is, like I said, you have to be very careful getting this off. I don't know that they even sell these springs separately. I haven't looked. They might. If they do, whoever knows, make sure to share that link in the comments below. So that is your rack spring. As you can see, pre-facelift, taller, thinner one, facelift, shorter, stronger one. I wouldn't recommend this, but like I said, if you guys want to go that route, go at your own risk when it comes to trying to tighten that bolt. So that's the top 5. Now with the top 6, we're going to be getting a little bit closer to what actually got me to the situation I'm in now, where I was finally able to fix mine, which is tie rods. So these are your tie rods that are going to come off an E46. Now your tie rods can get worn right here where this rubber joint is, and they just have excessive play. I saw a video online where I want to say it was the 50s kid, and he's a really good guy. He knows his stuff really well, but he said something that was a little misleading. He had his car on jack stands, and he said, if you can turn this, that means your tie rods are bad. Well, if the car's on the ground, sure, but if there's no pressure on the wheels and you can turn this, that's not actually out of the ordinary. Now, the reason that's not out of the ordinary is because these are designed, as you can see, to have a little bit of play in that ball joint there. Regardless of what condition the rubber is in, these tie rods are designed to have a level of play. They're not designed to be 100% rigid. Now, if there is excessive play on these, even if the wheels aren't on the ground, then you may need new tie rods. The biggest thing you want to look for is tears. You want to just check to make sure the rubber is still intact. So yeah, that's really the signs of a worn tie rod. All right, so speaking of tie rods, here's just a glimpse of your inner tie rods. You can sometimes develop excessive play in those, which can also cause some slop in your steering as well. So if that's the case, if you've done everything else I've mentioned before and you haven't checked these, might be worth looking into. Now, we're gonna get a little more in depth into tie rods later as to why that could cause some play. But for now, we're gonna move on to 7, which is gonna be this guy right here. That's your steering coupler. That connects directly to the steering rack, which then connects directly to your steering shaft, or other vehicles would call it a steering column. The thing about these is they have basically a rubber disc, very similar to like the engine mounts and the bushings and everything like that. They're on E46s and a lot of BMWs. They're made out of rubber, and that actually, this use of rubber actually gives the vehicle a very smooth feel. So if you're one of these kind of aficionados, old school enthusiasts, that you don't like the solid transmission mounts, you don't like the racing engine, whatever, differential bushings, etc. You want to go stock because you want a smoother ride. This is actually a big proponent of why that ride is so smooth. Now, even though these are a big proponent to allowing all the BMWs that you ride in to ride very smooth, this rubber can also wear out quite a bit quicker than polyurethane, and it's also more susceptible to grading with heat. So, it's just something to keep in mind. And your steering is also smooth. I have to give credit where credit's due. This was actually not a bad design. I've seen some videos online where people are trashing these. Oh, they're terrible. They're this, they're that. This is the one that came off my E46 after 250,000 miles. I have to say it's in relatively good shape. It doesn't have a ton of give in it. The sign if these are worn out is they will have a lot of play. I recommend if you're able to get underneath the car, grab it, wiggle it, see if it gives you excessive play. That can definitely cause some steering slop. That can definitely cause you to have that big dead spot in your steering wheel. So that's something to look into. Now, to expand on that steering coupler a little bit more, what actually solved my issue was very unexpected. One of these bolts were actually loose. Now, of course, this was the stock one. I upgraded to a Condor Motorsports solid coupler. And believe it or not, one of the bolts were actually loose. So it was allowing that steering shaft to move around in there. And that's actually was causing the steering play. So it's always good to check the bolts too. That's why I recommend, if you are wanting to save yourself some money and troubleshoot it, go around and feel for stuff. Feel if it's loose. And if certain stuff is loose, it's a good indicator that it could be bad. So yeah, basically grab that, test it, and then you'll be able to tell if it's good or bad. So that brings us on to the next one, which is kind of what I was dealing with before, which the steering shaft was loose. This right here, let me slide this back so I can see. That right there is your steering shaft. Now, I don't hear about it often, but sometimes your steering shaft or your steering column can develop some play on the upper end of it. In my case, it was actually the lower end. This bolt right here was loose, and that's what actually caused it. And if that's the case, you're gonna have to get a new steering column or steering shaft. And really the best way to find out is you're gonna get under your vehicle, you're gonna take off that aluminum tray and just feel around. That's how I actually figured out that it was actually the issue. I had a brand new steering rack put on by a certified shop because I had just gotten so frustrated with the whole job. I said, man, I just don't have the time for it. So I had them put it on. And what was interesting is after they put on the brand new steering rack, I still had that play. And I go, man, what is going on? That's when I got underneath the vehicle. I started feeling around, and the easiest way to do it is put your key in the ignition, turn it on just enough to where the steering wheel will be unlocked, so you can freely mess around and see, is this loose from the bottom? Is it loose from, the disc there in the middle? Is it loose at the top? Is it loose from the steering column? That'll all kind of help you troubleshoot which one it is. So we have gone all the way up to 9. So the 9th reason as to why your steering may be loose on your E46 could be power steering. That is always possible. I kind of tend to say that it would do the opposite, but a lot of people out there do say that if you're having power steering issues, it's leaking, you don't have enough fluid. Sometimes it can cause your steering wheel to be loose. From my experience, it's actually the opposite. It'll cause your steering wheel to squeal, and the steering will feel a little tight. It'll be noisy. So yeah, I mean, that is always possible. And I kind of have this mixed in with 9, which is your actual steering wheel itself. There is a bolt behind the steering wheel that occasionally can come loose. And typically from what I've seen, when that comes loose, it's not actually going to make your steering wheel be loose in terms of it, having that dead spot, but it's actually gonna be loose in terms of the actual kind of side to side play, as you can see here. Yeah, that's the top 9 reasons. And then finally, number 10, which definitely helped my issue. I'm not gonna say it was the reason. The reason that I got mine fixed was that bolt. But of course, I'm in a very different situation than a lot of people because the modifications I've done to my E46. So this 10th reason is for all you guys out there who have modified your E46 to lower your vehicle. And now this may not be something just pertains to BMW E46 people. This can be anybody out there who's actually lowered your vehicle. So if you wanted to get a different stance on the car, make it look cooler, you wanted to have a performance coilover setup, etc. When you lower the vehicle, typically a lot of people will just go for the nice coilovers. They're gonna say, I'm gonna lower the car, I want it to look good, want it to handle good, and they just do coilovers. That's fine, but you're gonna run into some issues there, and that's what I've come to realize, because your stock tie rods are not going to be the right geometry when you actually lower that vehicle, because these are designed from OEM spec. These are gonna be designed for the stock ride height of that vehicle. So when you lower that ride height of the vehicle, you're gonna put additional stress on these tie rods, and the vehicle's not gonna handle to its optimum performance. And then also you can get a dead spot in the middle of your steering wheel, and you also can get what's called bump steer. That's something I encourage you all to kind of go look up on your own. I could do an hour-long video on bump steer alone. So there's plenty of videos out there on that. Just look into it. Because it is something that's very interesting, and it wasn't brought to my attention. So I ended up actually getting a bump steer correction kit, and this is what that kit looks like right here. And it has never handled better. Of course, my E46 is lowered on Bilstein B14 coilovers. So, and it was something I never knew. Nobody brought it to my attention. I didn't see a lot of videos on it. So that's definitely something to think about. Now, the reason why those bump steer correction kits work so well is because it effectively changes the angle of your tie rod. It actually allows you to lower your tie rod. So it actually makes the geometry between your tie rod and your control arms just better, just a closer match. When we're talking about control arms, another culprit can be ball joints as well. There's quite a few of those on the front end of the E46. So you may want to feel around there on the control arms and see if those ball joints feel secure. But basically it allows you to lower your tie rod to make the angle more effective. Garagistic, Turner Motorsports, a few other companies make some really good bump steer correction kits. You can almost think about them like racing tie rods, because when they come in, they're durable, they're lightweight, they look nice. It's definitely a good upgrade. So I would encourage you all to troubleshoot those 10 reasons to see why your E46, or any vehicle for that matter, is having loose steering. That's all I got. I can't think of anything else. Make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, Drive safe.